Now, you look pretty tricked out today. I think you're good. There you go. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Public Works Finance Committee meeting for Monday, June 24th, 2019. First order of business is approval of the June 10th Public Works meeting minutes.
Good by me.
Same.
Okay, we'll assume those are approved. Bill, are you sitting in for Gary?
I am.
Okay. So we won't wait for his arrival. Okay, item number 2 on today's agenda is sanitary sewer service to Appaloosa Court. And Bob Bevell and Tyler Palmer are going to tell us about what's going on there.
We've even got a handy dandy slideshow for you today.
Nice.
It's going to be enthralling.
Anything that has to do with sewers is always
It's always fun stuff.
super entertaining.
All right. Good afternoon. Chairman Bolin and Art, appreciate the opportunity to be here today to talk about this item on the agenda. We have our sanitary sewer service to Appaloosa Court. Appaloosa Court is a trailer park that is off of the old Pullman Highway. So the University of Idaho facilities are here, the golf course is here, and this is the old Pullman Highway. As it continues here, we are out in Latah County, so this is not in city limits, this is out in the county, and this is the footprint for Appaloosa Court right here. So that's the subject property, what we're here to talk about today. The situation that we've got is that they have an unpermitted discharge that was discovered. The U of I conducted a surface water study, and when they did that, they came across a discharge from this property that was an unpermitted discharge. So they had lagoons as treatment for their sewer system for that property. And they weren't permitted lagoons, and they also just were not compliant. And so the DEQ is requiring that the discharge permit be in place in order to continue operating the park. And given the footprint that they have, they're not going to be able to accomplish this within the footprint of the lagoon system that is currently in place. And so that limits their options on how to get sewer treatment to this park in order to continue operations. Appaloosa Court, it's outside city limits, as I said, it's in the county. The city has previously provided service to properties outside city limits. We have a provision in our code to allow that. And the way that works is for people to whom we provide service outside the city limits, there's a set rate of 2 times the established rate for people who are inside the city limits. Generally, in order to do that, we've required an annexation at the time of providing service or a no contest agreement. If it's something that the city is not moving toward annexation at that point, then we would have a no contest agreement in order to connect to the city's system. Appaloosa Court, there's 66 stalls there, 44 of them are currently occupied. So what the owner of the property has requested to do is that he's requested permission. They've requested permission to connect to the City of Moscow sanitary sewer system, and to only be charged for the 44 active sites, the sites that actually have residences on them. And they've also put in a request to have the sewer rates charged be 150% instead of the 200% that is in the city code. The city is not in a position where we think we would propose seeking annexation on this property, and the owner has considered future multi-family development on this site.
Also, the owner is not seeking annexation at this time.
So this is the route that the proposed sewer would take. These aren't manholes. This is just the stations for the line, and so it just shows the elevations of the pipe. So this is our water reclamation and reuse facility. This is the subject property, and so this is the route that would take in order to tie down in and be tied into our treatment system. So the items that are coming before the commission for consideration are whether or not to allow connection to the city sanitary sewer system, the charging of the GFCs for maximum occupancy, so the 66 stalls or just the 44 active stalls, whether or not to require annexation or a no contest agreement, and and then questions about providing sewer service to future development on the subject property. After reviewing this, the staff recommendation is to allow connection to the city sanitary sewer system, to charge the general facilities charges only for the active sites, for the 44 active sites. The recommendation from staff is to deny the owner's request for a reduced sewer rate, to require a no contest of annexation agreement, and then to require the owner to enter a development agreement restricting the use of the proposed sewer service to that of the existing development, and that any further development or redevelopment would have to be approved by city council. And so those are the recommendations that we bring to the council on this item, and with that, we would stand for any questions y'all might have.
In this context, is a no contest agreement, does that basically, is that setting up in the future, if we wanted to annex that property, they couldn't fight that? What does that mean?
Yeah, that's basically what it means. It means it's an agreement where they say, look, if and when it gets to the point where you do come to annex, we're not going to fight you over the annexation.
Okay.
So if we're setting things up with the current 44 units worth of use, and does that, you indicated that this would lock the land into a certain use governed by what? Because if it goes to multifamily, what does that do relative to the use tables with 44 mobile homes up there now?
I think that's the condition that we're trying to address with that last bullet point, is that if it were to redevelop, that would then require it to come back through a process of review by the city and ultimate approval by the city council. Bill, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, ultimately, I mean, this area is an area that is somewhat difficult for us to serve. The city does not have any water system, really, I think, within 3,000 feet of the site.
Right.
It's also connected to the city by a rural county road that we do not own nor maintain. There are no pedestrian facilities along there. If we were looking at this as a greenfield site, I don't think we would be extending cities, utility services in order to promote development of this location. I think the consideration here is more of a humanitarian. I mean, we've seen mobile home parks that have gone through wastewater system challenges and the outcomes and implications of that occurring. So I think the city staff felt that it may be appropriate to accommodate the service, but we don't want to spur or further development in that location until the full city services can be provided to that area. And thus, entering into the development agreement would limit it to the 66 spaces in the current mobile home park. So they could continue to expand, and they would pay GFCs, and they'd increase their monthly utility billing as new units are installed. But that we would be agreeing to provide service to that property for its current use, and any change or modification or intensification of the use of that property would have to come back to the city council for their review and approval.
So relative to engineering and not doing twice what you could do once, would the infrastructure be geared to accommodate multifamily homes and redevelopment of the site?
That'll be up to the owner. This is a private sewer line. They'd be paying to construct it. We would not be maintaining it. So it'd be up to them to decide what size they felt was appropriate if they wanted to oversize it beyond what's necessary to serve the current mobile home park.
Also, the area has a rather jaded history. And I am hoping that under new management, things would be changed up a bit, because some of the potential chemicals that I know have come out of those homes in the past, bluntly speaking, meth lab, the impact that would have on our wastewater reuse and reclamation facility could be substantial, and I'm hoping that that does not play into this at all, because there's a larger consideration down at the treatment plant if such activities continue. And your point about the county road out there, I'm not keen on bringing another road into the city that's not up to current standards, because that's just giving the rest of the taxpayers in town a giant headache. So I'm not keen on annexation, but with the extension of sewer services out there, I'm thinking how that plays in with our issues that we've had with the Southeast Sewer District over the past few years as well. And this is something where I'm kind of hoping that maybe, Mr. Chairman, we could hear from the applicant on and answer some of the questions.
Yeah, I'd like to hear that too. Also, a question about The same with the southeast sewer district, where we don't provide water for them, but we provide sewer services. We have basically no control over, if they don't pay, you can cap the pipe, I suppose, but if it's private property, that's an additional problem, where we don't have any control. We can't shut the water off if they don't pay the bill. So that's something of a concern to me, and we've run up against that in the past, where we don't have any.
You can only plug the discharge.
Yeah, and then discharge in the southeast situation where we maintain that, we have control over that, but if this is private property, there's another legal problem with that, so, perhaps that.
Another one I have too that, for the assembled, is what does the university think about this? It's their land that's being impinged upon by the wastewater that's coming out over the edge. What's their opinion on everything?
So far, from what I've heard from the developer's engineer, the owner's engineer, and what I've heard from representatives from the U of I, is that verbally there's an agreement to allow the sewer line to go through. However, the university is wanting the owner to go through the will serve process before they will finalize routes and things
Easement.
like that, and before they'll finalize easements and
So they're
routes
waiting
and
for
things
us
like-
to take the
So
first
they're
step.
basically waiting for us to take the first step before they get very serious about
Well,
it.
I think they want to know if we'll provide the service or not, because that's kind of the first step, is to know if the city, because if the city's not going to do it, everything else becomes a moot point. And so they're saying, okay, find out if the city's willing to do this, and then we can work on getting an easement and working through that.
And so the other big question is, what happens if we do nothing?
Well, ultimately, if we do nothing, then the property owner would have to look at what alternative they had to come into compliance with their wastewater. And we just wouldn't be a component
And it
of
didn't
that
sound
solution.
very sanguine at the beginning. It didn't sound like
It's
there
a,
was
it's a
much
diff,
possibility.
the existing footprint is just too small to be able to put drain fields and, your typical lagoon to handle a site of this size. So they'd have to look at either buying adjacent property or something like that to try to do that. And
Sounds
since
like
it's
pretty much-
adjacent to the U of I property and some other, it seems that's not a real
So
feasible option
that
either.
would be something of a death sentence to the current use.
Well, I don't want to speak for the owner,
That's
but
something you might ask the owner about.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't, what size would it be? 30 or 25, or how many units could the current system handle? Or don't?
That's something the owner's engineer would have to look at that and figure out. That's not anything we've run numbers on, I don't think.
No, and I haven't.
At some
I
point where it's
haven't heard anything on that.
economically not feasible to operate the park because of the income you could get from that, so. I guess we'd invite the owner to the table and hear what he has to say about it. Your intentions are probably gonna have some weight on how we
Yeah.
proceed.
Sure. Which question
You're
first?
gonna just state your name.
Rusty Olps?
So anyway, with all the questions, I'd like to hear more about your plans for the future of this and, that will help me, in my mind, decide, which way do we want to tip this thing? Because I would like to see something that addresses some more of Moscow's housing needs, but it becomes kind of difficult. And then with the stipulation that we really aren't interested in annexing it because it comes with a lot of other problems in addition to just the sewer service, the road chief among them. What do you have in mind by way of the multifamily, the redevelopment, maybe throwing a lasso around some of the previous malfeasance that's gone on up there, things like that?
I'll give you a brief history of my involvement. I bought the trailer park just a couple years ago from the Leonard Chen family. He has since passed away. We both went into the deal with confidence that it was a good situation. They were willing to carry the note as a further evidence that they didn't see a problem. I've been a couple years in negotiation with the DEQ since then, because not long after I bought it, I got a call to cease and desist operations, which precipitated in multiple conversations and the hiring of engineers and talking to the city and the county and the U of I and the DEQ for countless hours over the last couple years. As far as management goes, I have taken it down to 44 units by virtue of not viewing many of those units as livable, or to rent them as they were would further precipitate the low quality of living that comes often commensurate with meth labs, et cetera. So I've been tearing down units, trying to clear space in order to make the property developable. So that's why it's got such bad vacancy, is evictions, demolitions, et cetera. I don't want to rebuild it as a mobile home park. I don't have a comprehensive PUD to show you guys or anything. I think it's a little premature for that. But my desire is not to build multifamily on it so much as to create true affordable housing by reducing the size. I mean, it's a simple process whereby you give people less land and less money, less land and less property for less money. But there's very little in that under $150,000 range. And so that's what I would not want to go into this meeting giving you any sort of false hope that I can do that next year. I have existing tenants to take care of. I'm trying to be mindful of that. If it wasn't for the humanitarian concerns, frankly, I probably would have walked away from this deal. But I'm going to stay married to it as long as I can afford to. So that would be the desire, is to build truly affordable, real property where you can own a small house on a small piece of land on the edge of town. The people who are there now have a poor approximation of that vision, but it is something. They do have a little bit of space, and they do have the freedom that a lot of homeowners enjoy. So I want to develop that concept of affordable housing. So I don't want y'all's deliberations to result in something that appears disingenuous if I were to take further development actions. So I'm stating my intentions. At the same time, I'm asking you to act in consideration of who is already there and the current situation. I have an easement that was written in 1986 that we dug up, unbeknownst to me. And that's one of the reasons the University of Idaho is so willing, apart from humanitarian concerns, to consider allowing the sewer easement. So the pieces are more or less in place. I've asked for a reduction in the fees. I'd be happy with the staff's recommendations. I want to make sure that what you guys pass will allow the development of the property, even if that includes some kind of ongoing relationship with the city as far as redevelopment goes. There you go.
Question just popped in my head. After, should we approve it, then the sewer line be built, who would own and be responsible for maintenance of the line?
I would. It'd be a really long sewer line. Just like with a house, only it crosses 3,000 feet of University of Idaho property.
And the other question I had was, what about, as the development occurs,
Art, can I provide a little clarification on that last question that you asked? It's one of the reasons that it's important for us to have provisions in place about redevelopment, because that is true as long as that remains a single parcel, but if that was split into multiple parcels, so we had multiple private owners, technically where two of them came together, that becomes a public main, and so that condition could change were the parcel to be subdivided. So that's just one of the reasons that we'd want to stay abreast of that and be able to have a voice through that process.
Yeah, because I was thinking back to the Southeast Sewer District, who owns it, who maintains it, and the weird legal conundrum that we found ourselves in. Yeah, but anyway, is a good point. But as the development might progress and things like that, are you anticipating building the line large enough to accommodate that?
Yes, 8-inch sewer line.
Oh, yeah, it's-
As you talk about developing it later and selling parcels to other people, then the problem of controlling non-payment becomes more prevalent. I think as long as you're in charge of everything and you're collecting for everyone or paying for everyone, then we only have to deal with one person. If there's 15 people in there that are tied up, then we get a Southeast Moscow Sewer District thing, and if people don't pay, then, and they're not using our water, we have no control over making them
yeah,
pay.
and I don't
That
know all
becomes more complex at that point.
It does. I'm all for keeping it simple. I don't know what enforcement would look like as you have permitting processes through the county, and then you have city enforcement of tap fees and these kinds of things. That sounds kind of hairy to me. So I would want to set it up such that it's dealt with as a single customer.
It would be like a homeowners association, and
Exactly.
they would pay into that, and then you would control
Yeah.
and pay the bill, and
It would be extra
They
work
collect-
for me to subdivide the property. That would require a PUD. And I might want to consider that option. An argument against it is this issue of what do you do about enforcing payment to individual meters when you have one tap. So another option is to condominiumize the improvements, like any condo situation, and then have a homeowners association that is responsible for certain fees, such as the sewer fee.
are you considering attaching to city water?
I can't
as
find a way to do that. I would like to, but as far as I can tell, the only way to do it is through the easement where the sewer line is. And I don't know if I can get an easement wide enough to accommodate those lines.
You guys have anything to add to that?
I do have a little bit to add to that. The current design does include a lift station that is required to get the effluent up and over a hill before it gravities down to our line. Historically, as the city, we try not to take over smaller lift stations like the ones that are proposed. That being said, DEQ does allow privately owned, but what they call public systems. They are owned by private people, but operated by a licensed operator. That where theoretically in the future, a homeowners association could hire an operator to be in charge of their system, be in charge of their maintenance, check it out on a regular basis, and without getting the city of Moscow involved in that situation. It can happen. I don't know of any place in Moscow that it does, though.
Well, it happens at all the trailer parks
Syringa was set
currently.
up that way.
I have a licensed operator, and I every month have to send water samples to the state. So it would be in compliance with the state's requirements.
As far as putting a water line, water service in there, that's impossibly difficult, other than going up the same easement.
I'm sorry. It'd be a similar situation to this where the request could be made. It would obviously be at the cost of the developer. We don't have water in close proximity. And so, we'd have to have it modeled and see what pressures would be, et cetera, just to see what it would take to provide service there. And then it would be a matter of them making a request for service, and we'd be back doing the same thing for water.
Where that area as far as water service would go, that area is almost kind of landlocked by the university. So all the closest water lines in that area are owned and operated by the University of Idaho. So us trying to get some sort of a line out there to that property is problematic.
It'd be less problematic to get the University of Idaho to provide water.
Our water reclamation reuse facility is actually on the U of I's domestic system. Like, that facility is not even on city's water.
Right.
So while we're talking legal goodies, what happens when you are crossing Washington and the smart transit flattens you? And we've gotten into putting in the sewer line under the current agreement, say with what the staff proposes here. What happens at that point? Would any new owner also be similarly obligated to the model that you're proposing, especially relative to the payment issue, capping off if people aren't paying, things like that? What kind of legal structure are we looking at here? Because I'm suddenly seeing the southwest sewer district,
Southeast, yeah.
southeast there, southwest there, so I don't know. Do we need
Do
something?
you want to take that one, or do you want me to?
You go ahead.
Well, it would, if council does recommend that we set up the development agreement, those development agreements are binding to the heirs and assigns. So if something were to happen to Mr. Olps, whoever inherited the property after him would be obligated to the same conditions of that development agreement as Mr. Olps was. Same thing if he sells it to another developer.
Okay, well, I guess personally, I'm in favor of allowing the connection. I think it's a good thing to do. It solves a spillover problem that needs to be addressed. And certainly the humanitarian concerns that you addressed about the current residents, I think it's helpful there. So I'm in favor of that. The reduced rate, I guess I'd like to address that in the future after it's operational and we find out what problems we might, if it becomes a no-problem situation and we feel it's expedient to do so, that we could reduce the rate. But I would want to start out the way the code is structured now.
I think so. We have to start somewhere, and I do think the current rates as set forth in policy, we need to stick to our guns on that part. And like you, I'm not feeling too awful about extending service, especially as regards to providing some more affordable housing in town, and also with the extended benefit of cleaning up Syringa-like situation there, and bringing a little more back into utility and underdeveloped and sketchy sort of property.
If we were to move forward with this, would you still need to require, or to secure a DEQ permit? Yeah? Okay.
Not a discharge permit, as I understand it.
No, not a discharge permit.
I don't know what they would
They'd
call it.
review.
This is what they
I
want.
don't know that they would. I don't know exactly what DEQ's requirements would be in that situation, since it's essentially just a long service connecting to our system. So DEQ would basically just want to see that we were willing to take their effluent and make sure that it was going to get treated. And I don't know what other requirements they would have. I don't think they would have any, as long as they understood that we were willing to take that effluent and treat it.
If there was another planned unit development with 44 units that was tying into the city system, DEQ wouldn't have a problem with that as long as it complied with code.
No, I mean,
So I don't see how this would be any
Yeah,
different.
that's right. Our system is required to be maintained in compliance with DEQ, and we go through inspections, routinely for that. And so, yeah, it's discharging to
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 a
an
licensed
approved system.
treatment, yeah.
Great.
Okay. Well, I guess I would recommend that we put this on the regular agenda for consideration at the next meeting with the conditions that staff recommends.
Okay.
And move forward from there. And if we can make it more economical, I would be in favor of that, but I don't think that's the place can start.
I understand.
Okay.
So you're advocating for putting it on the agenda, but do we want to make a recommendation? Is that recommending approval
Yeah,
with staff? Okay.
So there were 4 specific items that the staff was looking for direction on. The first of which was whether we wish to provide the will-serve letter and under what conditions would the city provide service, either without annexation or with annexation. So it sounds like without annexation is the
Without.
committee's
Yes.
preference. The second item was any potential restriction on future use of the property, and staff did recommend a development agreement that would control the use of the property to the 66-unit mobile home park until such time as the council may approve some alteration to that. And the committee seems like they're in agreement with that.
Right.
Then we had the general facilities charges, which was allowing them to pay only the 44 active, and future sites would pay as homes are set, and that seemed to be agreeable to the committee. So the last question with this, then the monthly sewer service rate, which the committee appears to be recommending maintaining the current 200% for out-of-city service rates.
Yep.
So those would be the 4 recommendations of the committee.
Agreed.
Yep.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
We'll bring that to council at the next meeting.
Thank you
Thank
for a
you.
good
It'll be more
explanation of a
fun.
complex issue,
Oh,
gentlemen.
it's a hideous, complex issue.
Okay, item number 3 on today's agenda is Indian Hills Ninth Phase 2 Design Standards Variance. Bob's back on deck here with this one.
Okay, changing gears. So this topic is the Myrtle Street construction that's coming up soon as part of what the developer is calling the Indian Hills Ninth Phase 2 development. Just to get an idea of what we're talking about, here's the vicinity map. This is the Grove, US 95, and that's Myrtle Street right there. Just a little background information. Myrtle Street was originally platted with the Indian Hills 9th edition, or Indian Hills 8th edition, which was the Grove, Campus Crest, whatever you want to call that. With the development agreement of Indian Hills 8th, construction of Myrtle Street was deferred to be constructed with Indian Hills 9th. It's also the construction of Myrtle Street is also in the Indian Hills 9th development agreement. Our current road section design standards do require sidewalk on both sides of the street for public streets. It's like that currently now. It was also like that when Indian Hills 8th was platted. There's also topography is also an issue as far as the sidewalk goes. The topography adjacent to Myrtle Street along the Grove or Campus Crest frontage is steep, which would make any connection to the sidewalk problematic. This is the proposed construction. It currently does show sidewalk on both sides, even though the developer preferred to not show it. They wanted to get the plans approved, and I told them the only way we could do that is if they did show that the sidewalk on both sides. But the big reason to show this is these contour lines those are 1 foot contour lines, and you can kind of see that it's a pretty serious slope down to Myrtle Street, and the Grove right here is the only property that would be served by that sidewalk. So the owner did submit a request letter asking permission to delete the sidewalk from the east side of Myrtle from the project. The owner's points in the letter were that the access to the walk would be hindered by the topography of that slope. It would be an additional burden on the development. And the owner doesn't believe that Myrtle was intended to be a full city street. He thinks it was intended to be more of an alley or an access road. Staff's recommendation is to deny the variance request and require the sidewalks on both sides of Myrtle. The reasons for that are reduced pedestrian crossings. If you only build sidewalk on one side of the road, pedestrians trying to use that walkway on the one side then have to make unnecessary crossings, crossing the street to get to the other side in order to continue on down the road. Having a sidewalk on both sides does facilitate expansion of multimodal facilities like bus stops. If future bus expansion, the smart transit routes were to expand through that area, if we wanted to put a bus stop there, we would the taxpayers would be kind of on the hook for trying to put that sidewalk in order to lead to a bus stop, depending on how that would go. The redundancy helps with pedestrian detours. So if for some reason the sidewalk ever gets closed down, that the sidewalk on the west side ever had to get closed down, we can simply detour people to the other side rather than having to send them all the way across, all the way around the block for detours. And then future development of these lots could potentially make some sort of a pedestrian access here in demand. If these were to be developed in something like the University Crossing with like a Jams yogurt or convenience stores or something like that, somebody wanting here in the Grove wanting to access either this lot or this lot would then have to walk all the way out and around in order to get to that. With a simple connection similar to what Walmart did, it would eliminate that need to do that walking. So with that, do we have any questions?
Of course.
Of course.
What's the street section, and is it contemplated to have parking one side, both sides?
It's expected to have parking on both sides because this was platted before 2014. They're allowed to do the road section from the previous revision of road standards that we have. So that current set was a 34-foot wide road, which had two 7-foot parking lanes with two 10-foot driving lanes. So it is intended to have parking on both sides, yes.
In terms of bus access, one of the big talking points for Smart Transit this year was whether or not they wanted expanded hours versus additional access. And the Grove was a big driver for that conversation. They felt that was an underserved area. So to me, it makes sense that you would want to have some kind of access point there. Talking about sidewalks.
To be fair, I should point out that when the Grove was developed, there was a bus stop built on the on the east side of the development right here.
With the purpose of serving Smart Transit? Not
Yes.
serving, but,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Whoever needed it later in the future.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So we've got the development of the police station right there on the 1800 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to me as another reason to have sidewalks on
It's-
both sides of that.
With that being proposed to be the site of our new police station, it does seem likely that we would want potentially to have a bus stop there next to it, which is part of the reason we brought it up.
Yeah, the proposed relief from sidewalks on both sides makes reasonably good sense as a snapshot right now, but I don't think quite so much going into the future with future development of, as you pointed out, the lots in between the police site and Pape Machinery. If something goes in there that might require parking on both sides of the street, having a sidewalk on both sides of the street does nothing but make sense. And really, I'm trying to look forward into the future. Any sidewalk in this town, any street that's developed and didn't have sidewalks on both sides has come back to cause problems now. And
Expensive problems.
Do we have an idea? Shelley, you can come speak.
I've been requested to attend for the Indian Hills Trading Company, and I don't have a lot of background on this because I didn't even know this was happening until about.
Say your
20
name
minutes
so
ago.
that,
Shelley Bennett, 2279 Mosier Street.
thank you.
Thank you. All I want to do is give you a little background because you weren't here and I'm the historian now. When the Grove was put in, we anticipated that those lots would be something like a grocery store. So that's why he said he had anticipated that that wasn't going to be a fully served city street because that was what was discussed. At no point in time do I believe that was put in writing anywhere, but that was the discussion with the city and the landowners. But that's 20 years ago. So it predates everybody, and I don't think it's in writing anywhere. Jack Hammond, who called me and asked for me to attend this meeting on his behalf, said that he says it's physically impossible to put that sidewalk in. So that just means it's going to cost a whole lot of money. The up above it, it's a gated. It's Grove. The Grove is they gated it so people couldn't get out. So that's why when we did the initial one on the Grove, we made it on the side where there was an access. There is no access off of that. It's straight up and downhill. So I think if there was some way to make some sort of I think that they should come forward with a better picture of what they think they could do. But if it's impossible for them to build the sidewalk there, if they can come up with something that would be an alternative, like a bus stop access or something, I don't know. But again, I'm behind the 8 ball huge because I wasn't up to speed on this. But I just wanted to give you the background information of what I knew from when the Grove was put in, and that's where they're coming from on that. And then Mr. Hammond says, or the engineer says, it's physically impossible to be built because of the slope.
So how far would a sidewalk impinge upon that slope, do you figure?
Aren't they 8 feet?
Well, according to the plans that they submitted, the grading for that has already occurred, and it does appear that the sidewalk does not quite get into the slope. I can't speak to what Mr. Hammond said. He may be implying that it would be impossible to get a connection from the Grove down to that sidewalk, but I believe the grading for that has already happened, and it does appear to stop short of the right-of-way where the sidewalk would be, I think.
Oh, you think they put an access in?
No, I don't think they did, no.
Oh, okay, no, they didn't, because it was just a gated community.
I think what he's saying is that when the street was graded, it was graded wide enough to accommodate sidewalk on both sides.
Okay.
And so the expense would be probably retention of the hillside from collapsing onto the sidewalk.
Right.
I would guess.
I would
think-
expect.
I think what Mr. Hammond is saying it would be infeasible would be to create a connection between the Grove and the sidewalk where it be built.
And I don't.
I can't
That's not
speak.
the sidewalk that's in the plat anyway, so
Right,
that's not the problem.
I can't necessarily speak for him, but that's just my,
That when he spoke to me, it sounded like it couldn't be built from Southview to the Palouse River Drive without it going through some sort of bizarre location. So I think, again, they need to show us a picture. I'm sorry that I'm not more help
Well, thanks
On
for
the
the
spot.
background that you,
Yeah.
that I can have. Thank you.
Yeah, so as it stands, I agree with staff's conclusions on this one.
yeah, I would too, because I think the grade's already in place, and if some sort of retaining barrier needs to be put up to keep the hillside from collapsing, or it needs to be additionally sloped in some way so that it doesn't, that shouldn't be a huge expense. providing access to the Grove is not part of the deal here. That's not, that's not what we're talking about, so I don't think that's really an issue. But I think we should go ahead and require that the sidewalk be on both sides, especially since the grading's already in place. That would be, is that the group's recommendation then?
That's mine, I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah, well, and I think it's hard for us to anticipate 50 years down the road what that's going to look like. And I mean, Art mentioned this, we just see that issue a lot now. And it maybe makes sense at the time, but can have an issue when there is more traffic potentially. So yeah, I agree. Sidewalk on both sides.
I think this is a consent agenda item. I don't think it needs further presentation.
It can go on consent, and if any member of the council wishes to pull it off, they can.
Great. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Okay, item number 4 on today's agenda is state and local agreement, project development of Third Street Safety Improvements Phase 1. Elisa and Nate are on deck with this.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So we have items 4 and 5. They're somewhat similar, so my presentation in the beginning and our discussion will be somewhat combined, but then we'll need to take separate action on both ones or recommendations, if that works. I'll be a little bit of a historian myself here today also. We were in front of you, I think it was between 4 and 6 weeks ago. I didn't check the exact dates. When we had asked the council and the committee also to allow us to send a letter to the Idaho Transportation Department and the local Highway Technical Assistance Council to allow us to, well, actually, they bid the project out, but to reject the construction bids we received for the 6th Street pedestrian safety project under also the local Highway Safety Improvement Program. Bids came in approximately 50% over what the engineer's estimates were. There were some mitigating factors there regarding a lot of contractors didn't know because it was bid out by ITD that it was really a City of Moscow project. There were some factors. And at the time, LTAC and ITD asked that we provide our permission from the council to go ahead and move that 6th Street project forward to be bid out with the 2 projects before you today for 3rd Street Phase 1 and Phase 2 of the safety improvements. How they were able to now fund this design, which in the State Transportation Improvement Program was not included until next year, is taking the funds that they had allocated for the 6th Street construction and move them into the development contracts of Phase 1 and Phase 2 of the 3rd Street Safety Improvement Project. So that's the history of how we got where we are today. And I think last time we were here, Gary said we anticipated to receive these contracts fairly soon, and we received them both in the last 10 days. So we're before you today. So looking at the individual items separately, Nate and I have been working on this project since 2017. We originally submitted it to the local Highway Technical Assistance Council as one project. They came back to us and said that's too big of a project and that we would need to phase it down into 2 areas, which Nate worked very hard and kind of figuring out how they kind of gave us a dollar amount of a project that we could work with, and then Nate worked to move backwards into it, and the Urban Renewal Agency also worked with us in committing to contribute funds toward the illumination in that area and giving it the same look that we really see that's in front of, that's on Jackson Street now.
College Street.
Yeah, with the street trees, the sidewalk, and that. One of the goals initially with this project was to eliminate all of the driveways that we have along 3rd Street from previous developments, where we have the convenience store and the laundromat and those things. So there's a lot of places where there's really no curb, it's just driveway, and not safe for pedestrians at that point. So the goal of the project was to bring it to current standards and to bring it to the look and the feel of the downtown area. So within these 2 contracts that we have before you today, is Phase 1 and Phase 2. Phase 1 is the first agenda item. And what I'd like to do with your permission is go ahead and have Nate give you a little bit of detail of the construction of both phases, and then we'll move forward with separate approvals on the dollar amounts. Would that, okay.
I was nodding before I had permission, Mr. Chairman.
So Elisa gave a kind of an overview of what it is. It's a sidewalk program, or it's access, it's illumination, essentially pedestrian safety as well as, so it makes sense to combine it with that 6th Street project. The goal would be to have 10-foot sidewalks, adjacent. Given the right-of-way that we have, we can't get that everywhere, so we'd essentially be maximizing the sidewalks. In some places, that's only a 5-foot walk. Some places, we get the full 10-foot multi-use walk. But it would create a compliant corridor. We'd eliminate all of you see the driveways that just have a patch of asphalt in them that are attempting to create a compliant surface, a compliant pathway for pedestrians. We'd eliminate those unused driveways and put in a compliant sidewalk from essentially Llewellyn, from that crossing there that crosses 3rd and the state highway as it jogs over, and that would connect all the way to Jackson. So it would go in with the new Varsity Diner development, so this would be where it would connect to. And that would be on both sides of the road.
And I think, and Bill can give us a little more details, some of the work that was included in this original project may be done before we get here with the new ICCU credit union, and I think the URA is working with that. So we're looking at having a fully blended project by the time this is done, correct?
Yeah, when the state did the large paving project here 2 years ago, we started some of the sidewalk work in front of at that time, Quad Cities Nissan dealership. That was probably one of the more antagonizing sites in the corridor to ITD, and that they did not like the continuous approaches, even though they weren't really utilized. They seemed to be something that they wished to address. And that was really one of the only, few concrete elements that they did as part of that paving project. And the city and the agency both contributed some funds to help assist with the replacement of the walk and the removal of those driveways. ICCU is now redeveloping the site. Some portion of that will be adjusted through their construction. Some portion will remain. There are 7 light fixtures along their frontage that we are determined are necessary based on the spacing of the decorative fixtures that we're going to work on getting installed as part of their project now. And the agency and city are both contributing to that. That just will allow us to not tear up their nicely completed project just about 18 months after they wrap it up. So we're going to try to get those in now. As part of that project, we're also going to be installing 2 luminaires on the pedestrian crossing of both 3rd and Highway 8 there. The lighting there is challenging in front of Papa Murphy's and across, so we'll have 7 light fixtures along the ICCU frontage, and then there'll be 1 in that triangular island between the 3rd and 8th crossings, and then 1 on the north side of the highway to help illuminate pedestrians and improve safety in that area. Some of those were actually anticipated as part of this project. Some are new and additional because of concerns that have been expressed more recently about pedestrian safety in the corridor. So there's some portions of this we will be doing a little bit in advance, but it is a large corridor. I think having a little bit done to free up a little bit of budget on the project will be helpful. One of the things that we are exploring is some of the utility conflicts along the corridor that maybe weren't fully anticipated as part of the project when it was put in for the grant application. We do have a lot of overhead utility poles in locations where we'd like to have our new decorative light fixtures. We have a meeting next week with all the utilities on the ICCU project to start a conversation about undergrounding those utilities on this corridor. It's a very visible entry into the downtown area, and we'd like to remove as many of those aesthetic conflicts of those utility poles out of at least the line of sight of the drivers through the corridor, and then eliminate some of those conflicting locations with the future decorative light fixture locations. So we'll be working on that. So any bit of budget, any work we can advance in advance of the actual grant-funded work, I think will help us down the road.
Okay, so Noting also that we have a resolution with each of these agenda items, I will go ahead and move forward with the staff recommendation that on Phase 1, we approve the state-local agreement for project development and the corresponding resolution for project number A020483 3rd Street Safety Improvements, key number 20483.
I sure think so.
Yeah, I think we
The
should.
project is kind of already well afoot, and it sure would be nice to finish it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's great that it's been advanced somewhat by transferring those funds, and I think that's great that we'll bring the whole thing to fruition. So I think we should advance it to council as with a recommendation to pass that.
Okay, okay. And then just for our city clerk to have the full documentation on the next agenda item, which I think is at number 5. Yes. The staff recommendation is approval of the state-local agreement project development and resolution for project number A021997, 3rd Street Safety Improvements, Phase 2, key number 21997.
I just want to say I'm so excited about this project because there's such a market difference, I think. Yeah. It's starting around Almond Street. I mean, it just feels so different. And for a corridor that has so much traffic on it, and it's just terrible for pedestrians. I'm just very, very excited. So, yes, absolutely yes. And thank you for all your work on this, too.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll recommend advance this to council and recommend approval based on staff's recommendation there as well.
Okay.
Here, here.
Would you like this to be on the consent agenda? What is your
Yeah, both of these-
recommendation there?
Both these projects have been discussed at length in council, so I think it's fine to put them on the consent agenda.
Excellent. Thank you.
You.
And I'll be staying with you for the police report.
Okay. That's what's up next is reports, police grant update. Elisa and Roger Lanier and Eric Warner from our police department, who I'm sure are eager to move into their new home as soon as we can get that constructed.
We welcome
We're
Officer,
gonna put a tent city out there and then, you know.
and I think we're welcoming Officer Warner today. Is this your first
This is my first council meeting.
time? So,
Welcome.
yeah, and we also have Roger with us in case he's on shift right now. So, back in November, and we've done this the last 3 years, we have came before you under your approval, council approval, to have an $50,000 cap on grants that we're working with for the police department. And those include the Shop with a Cop, the police mobilizations that we do. Also this year, we have an e-ticket program, and we'll be discussing that with you. And then also a new program called Partnership for Success. So, at this point in time, with where we are in those programs, we're still under our $50,000 cap, depending upon additional mobilizations that the department may do, but depending on staffing. As you know, they're short-staffed. We may reach that cap, and at that point in time, I'm not exactly sure if we'd need to come to open budget with that item, but we would need to come forward to you with some sort of agenda item once we know where we're going to fall before year end. So with that today, I just wanted to make note that the Child Passenger Safety Program is under a separate approval item, which is approximately anywhere from $20,000 to $30,000 a year. So that's not under this umbrella. So the project that Officer Warner is here to talk to us about today is the Partnership for Success.
Yeah. Under the Partnership for Success, we've been awarded a little over $6,000 in federal funding for increased enforcements for marijuana, methamphetamine, and alcohol underage use. Part of the programs we're looking to do, obviously, when school gets back in session on the campus, is to do some extra party patrols, do some plainclothes patrols, and maybe do some shoulder tap operations. Corporal Casey Green in the past said that they used to do a couple of those shoulder tap operations where they'd get some young-looking kids underage and see if they can go into a party and get served without getting carded. And if we can do something like that, we can try to crack down on not so much the underage drinking, but those that are supplying those who are drinking underage. And I think that would be nip it in the bud if we're able to get into a party house, quote unquote, with an underage student, that sort of thing. That's just just one or two of the couple of things that we wanted to do with that grant, with a little over $6,000 that we were awarded for overtime.
And it's focused mainly on ages 18 to 21, I
Yeah.
think. And
A lot of
it
the-
can be younger, too.
Yeah, obviously in the campus, they're doing their talks where they do education. When they go to the houses, they talk to them about all those things: drug use, underage alcohol use, marijuana use, especially with it being so readily available 5 minutes to the west.
And so this amount that we've been awarded, which is actually $6,411.56, is for a one-year grant. So we'll update you again at our yearly request for the cap, and we report quarterly. And maybe this fall, depending upon how things go, we'll have an update for you on this one at that time also, so.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah.
And so, also, Officer Warner could give you a brief update on the mobilizations that we have done this year so far and what we're looking at for the
obviously,
future.
So far, we've had 3 mobilizations under our belt. There's a sign-up sheet in the PD right now for the 1 week, for the 4th of July, from the 1st to the 7th. We're doing impaired driving emphasis. The extra officers out on the street trying to catch impaired drivers and whatever else may come up. A couple of the other events that we have, the aggressive driving towards the end of midsummer, and then Labor Day, obviously, with the extra traffic that's coming back into town. Idaho Department of Transportation has also been offering mini grants for a lot of the grants that they offer nowadays. There's only about I think 6.
6. We used to have like 18
Used to
a
be up to
year.
11. What they've tried to gear towards is for agencies to be able to do their own little mini enforcements. They're calling them mini grants. And so we'd be able to apply maybe during Mother's Weekend, that sort of thing, when there's extra traffic on the city streets here in Moscow that aren't typically, nationwide or statewide, because we see different traffic volumes and fluctuations than does the rest of the state. And so that's what they're trying to gear these things for, the mini grants. So
Oh,
I have
mini is mini.
about 3,000 or 4,000 tops, I would think. A lot of these grants, a lot of these mobilizations are upwards of $3,000, typically $2,000 to $2,500. And that's equivalent to $2,000 grant would be 12 3-hour slots, so 12 3-hour shifts for officers. And the 30,000 one would be up to 18 3-hour slots of time that officers would be out on the street doing high visibility enforcement.
And this is overtime only, plus benefits,
Yeah.
Right.
fringe and benefits, yes.
Who's the
So-
funding agency for this typically?
It's the Office of Highway Safety, and this is federal funding. We do have a CFDA number for each project. However, it's funneled through Idaho Transportation Department, their Office of Highway Safety.
And the $50,000 cap is a cap on grants that you're able to seek out, correct? As opposed to funds that we might supply.
Actually, what we started doing the last 2 years is, rather than having to bring every small grant forward to you that the police were doing, and actually the new success one we didn't know about last year. It's new, and it's not one where it's patrol car involved. It's more of an on-foot type
plainclothes.
and education type thing. We were having to come forward several times a year, and it was very staff intensive for projects under 50,000. And so the last 2 years, we'd asked to have your approval to do several of these different little projects, and then do reports on a quarterly basis or semi-annually based upon. So that's one of the reasons we're here today, is to update you on that. And we had, as I said, the new program that Eric just shared with you, and then also we have an e-ticket program that we're going to be talking about. So, and would you like to address e-ticket or?
E-ticket.
Yeah.
There's a program, they call it SWEAT, a statewide e-ticket. Right now, we're using a program called eSight, and it's problematic. A lot of the hardware that we have doesn't link up to our PC or doesn't link up to our computers. One of the cars I was working with yesterday, the IR scanner was broken. It still kind of worked, but it didn't populate all the fields in the e-ticket program, or with the eSight program that we currently have. SWEAT, through IT or IS department, it'll be a line budget out of them. They will provide 75% of the funding and we've been awarded the 75% of the funding to get all new printers, new scanners, and they provide the software for free at no cost. And that's through the Idaho Department of Transportation. I think it's what the county's using right now, and it's what the clerks are on right now, Lake Tahoe Clerk's office. So it will help streamline everything.
I was out on a ride-along, and, yeah, sure enough, the thing balked.
Yeah.
Sat there, and there was some muttering that went on, and people carried on
It's
nonetheless.
problematic. A lot of the times anymore, I just write them out by hand because I don't want to deal with that.
Yep.
It'll auto-populate something that's not supposed to be auto-populated, and somebody else's name will pop up. That happened to me today.
So right now, we're estimating that project with the equipment and the software to be approximately $12,500, and IS will be doing the equipment purchase and installation. We do have a deadline of having this project up and running by 9/30/19, and so it will be moving forward quickly. And the police department had considered this last year. Roger had looked at it and said, let's see how the bugs get worked out for everyone else, and we'll move forward this next year. And so I think a lot of the bugs have been worked out, and they're comfortable moving forward with it now, and so we're not the guinea pig up front on this one.
So does this take care of all the units, or just?
Yes,
All the police units, yeah.
and one of the motorcycles also.
Hopefully one of the motorcycles. That'll involve IS getting involved to help us install that equipment.
And this also ties in with what legal was doing with, everything becoming electronic through all the citations that are written also. So, any questions on what's happening in our police department, our very, very busy men?
With respect to the emphasis patrols that you're talking about, I can't speak for everyone, but I'd be really interested in the results that come out from those efforts, if you do the shoulder tap thing, how, does it really work? Do you get, what kind of results do you get from that? It'd just be interesting.
I think it'd be
Well, and
interesting if you got compliance.
Yeah, it would be.
Usually high visibility patrols are, there's a lot of history with high visibility patrols and that sort of thing. Personally, what I've noticed, being out on the motorcycle and being out on motorcycles, they don't see me on the motorcycle. I've seen an increased compliance in speeders coming into town from the south end. It's because it's one of the areas that I hit really hard when I was on a motorcycle, and those people didn't really see me until I was behind them with my lights on. And it seems like the word's gotten out. I sat down on South Main just before this meeting, and I haven't been able to catch a single speeder coming into town that I'd go after, which is kind of nice.
My only concern with measuring efficacy would just be that I wouldn't want it to be based on the number of citations. The program is working because we have more, So when you talk about
Right,
what
I
the
don't-
results are,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
difference in.
Did you, like Art said, did you use 6 shoulder tap
Oh, with those
situations and they didn't let any of them in? I'd want to know about that too. So
Okay.
there wasn't, is it effective? Have the efforts been effective in terms of the educational efforts on the Greek house, party house end of things, that they know that there's going to be people watching you, so don't do this. If we can change, I'd rather change behavior than cite people.
Yes,
Yes.
that's obviously an ultimate goal that we have here.
And I just bring it up because I think it's something to be mindful of when you talk about these programs.
So the quarterly reporting that they require us to submit for this asks for some of the details. And we have an outline of a budget where there's marijuana-related, presentations, party patrol, shoulder tap operations. So we'll need to track those different types of methods that they will use to implement the guidelines of this program. And so with those quarterly reports, we'll be able to provide you with some of those details.
With the current mobilization that we do right now, we track all the contacts that we've made. We track, obviously, the number of citations. And not always, the citations don't always equal the number of contacts. Typically, it's about a 25% rate, or maybe lower, that we're citing people. We're just making contacts, doing a lot of education. And that's also, those numbers also include the total contacts for the police department for that time period. So we're able to see total of contacts that made during the emphasis, and then total contacts made for the entire time that the emphasis was on. Not necessarily those emphasis working hours, but the total contacts that the police officers have made in that time span. And those are numbers that we do have, that I have at the office, obviously.
This grant also includes education. within it. And so there are different times at the beginning of the school year where the police participate in different events, bringing the new students on, and part of their education can be included in this underage drinking operations and methamphetamine-related presentation. So it's not just out there, you know, it's education, and I think that's kind of what you were looking at, is let's give them a warning, let's let them know what we're doing. This is new. And so also the compliance checks within this program don't necessarily mean you're going to issue a citation. It's maybe, you know, going somewhere and just making sure everything's going the way it's supposed to be.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any
very much.
questions? Okay, I can tell, you guys are ready to go. Thank you.
Bill?
If I might, real quick before we leave, in keeping with the police, just to give an update on the police services facility project and where we are. So we advertised requests for qualifications for design professionals on May 25th of this year. Those were due on June 12th. We also closed on the property on June 13th, so we are now the proud owner of that site. We had a 5-member interview committee that interviewed the 2 consultants that received proposals from, Trainar HL and Lombard Conrad Architects, on June 21st. And the committee unanimously recommended the selection of Lombard Conrad Architects. They are the firm that did our preliminary master plan on the recycling center site. We are working to try to get a design contract to the council potentially as soon as July 21st, so the meeting coming up on Monday. We're working on negotiations of the contract and the scope and the cost, so you may see that on the agenda. We did not have a chance to bring that to committee because it's still in negotiation, but we want to get that moving so we can get the design process off and running. So just a quick report on that project.
Was that
Gotta have it
decision?
designed before we can bid it, so sooner the better.
I'm sure they came in lower, but how much of a factor was that in your decision for selecting who we're going to use, the architecture firm?
That's not based on price, it's based on qualifications.
Okay.
So in the state of Idaho, professional services such as architectural engineering and other services, that selection is based on their qualifications and experience of the project and design team. And then you negotiate contract, scope, and cost after that.
As opposed to other bids we see for,
If it's for construction, then it's a bid price, and you are obligated to select the low bidder. For design services, it is based on qualifications, and then you negotiate the contract and the cost.
great, thank you.
You bet.
Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you. That's the end of our agenda today. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Let's go.
All right.
So, quick question for you, Bill.